Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Gair Maxwell. Gair is an internationally acclaimed best-selling author, keynote speaker, and brand strategist. His original market-tested ideas have inspired companies to grow 15 to 30 times while creating an irresistible category of one. He has inspired some of the world's best, including Apple's Specialist Marketing Group, Caterpillar, and many others. A recovering broadcast journalist, he is a TEC Canada Speaker of the Year, fully accredited Tennessee Squire, lifelong fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a 5-time runner-up on the prestigious MGA Golf Tour. His latest book, Big Little Legends: How Everyday Leaders Build Irresistible Brands, is available on Audible and Amazon and has been featured in Forbes. And Gair, I'm absolutely delighted and excited to have you here today, to have you share some of these really important insights for leaders to be able to build an irresistible brand and to play an even bigger game in this world and contribute at an even higher level. So I thank you for being here.
Well, likewise, I appreciate the invitation, and I admire the work you're doing to inspire people to play a bigger game. And that bigger game can take on so many different forms. I think Maslow wrote about a bigger game many, many years ago, leading all the way to self-actualization and whatnot. But let's just see where this goes. I love this because as your viewers and listeners may or may not know, we just met before she pressed record. We have no plan. We did not strategize. We didn't talk about any angles or how we're going to position this, did we, Vered?
Oh, that's the most fun. And I think that's what life should really be, is just to enjoy these delightful surprises. And so tell us, what are Big Little Legends?
Big Little Legends is a metaphor for small to medium-sized businesses who've created irresistible brands. What is an irresistible brand? Many people, well, let's just have fun with it. What's top of mind for you, Vered? And anyone watching or listening can play along, right? So when I say, well, what's an irresistible brand? What's the first thing you think of?
The first thought that I came up was Coca-Cola. That was the first thing.
Boom. And how many other people out there would be thinking brands like Apple, Nike, Disney, Patagonia, Starbucks? They would be irresistible brands, right? Let's go somewhere beyond corporate and share a more universal definition. Because I think if you can tap into that which is universally applicable, you will recognize this has nothing to do with segmentation like B2B, B2C, nonprofit, all the things that business people want to do. Business people love to segmentize and categorize and put it into a little box and then say, well, how are we going to think outside the box? Well, you created the damn box in the first place. Is that fair?
Yes.
Universal. And it starts in chapter 1 of the book, actually. So what is the most famous painting in the world?
Mona Lisa.
Right. So I've been on stages where when I get invited to do keynotes and whatnot at different conferences, I've been there. I remember the first time I asked an audience of over 700 people that question. And on the count of 3, I would say 99% of the audience responded with the Mona Lisa. So she becomes the symbolic representation of the undisputed queen of top-of-mind awareness in the category called famous paintings. So, Vered, how many paintings are there in the world? That's not the only painting that was ever painted. How many others are there?
Countless.
Is it a gazillion, cajillion? I don't know. What's the number? I know that in the Louvre, there's 35,000. Where did 99% of the audience go every day? There's 30,000. Like today, there's another 30,000 people going to visit the Louvre in Paris. And where's 99% of the audience all going to? See one painting. So she's a symbol of the undisputed, undeniable category of one. The bigger question to help your leaders, your viewers and listeners to play a much bigger game is why? Why did the Mona Lisa become the most, talked about, most top of mind, the most irresistible brand in the world? Why? What happened? How did that happen? Was there a time when she was not the most famous painting in the world? Was there? Because there was. And I don't want to give it all away because I don't want to ruin the story for people in chapter 1. Okay. But that's where the book starts. The book starts as a 12-chapter journey, and that's the through line. How were all these legends created in the first place? And in the case of the Mona Lisa, we can pinpoint the day. It was August 21st, 1911, and she was stolen. When she was stolen, that generated millions and millions and millions of dollars of free publicity on a 2-year news cycle that no painting ever got before or since. When she was finally recovered and returned, 120,000 people were there to greet her. What was the only mass media platform in 1911, 1912, 1913? The newspaper. She went viral because she's front page all over the world. The theory is this: what would have happened if the thief had grabbed another painting that day? Which painting would we be talking about 100 years later? It's a good question. So, for leaders everywhere, a story. In the case of the Mona Lisa, she got damn lucky. She won the publicity lottery sweepstakes. Ed McMahon came to her door and knocked on it and said, "Here, you won." Okay. If another painting had got stolen, and one of the theories is that because she was so small to begin with, it was easy for him to hide under his smock and get out of the building without being noticed, without drawing any attention. So a story either happens to you, or as a leader, you got to make one happen. And either way, the universal application is you can't create the legend without the story.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And it's fascinating. And what's coming through my mind now is, I remember attending a Tony Robbins event years ago, and the woman that happened to be standing by my side said, it's easy to let's say if somebody wanted to become famous or to have a big following, if you have a story, right, like rags to riches or something like that. But she said, but I don't have a story. I just had a normal childhood. I had a normal life. I don't have a story. So what would you say about that?
Oh, that's patently false.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's got a story. Everyone. That's what I've discovered in my work. Just because you didn't find the cure for cancer, climb Mount Everest, win Olympic gold, doesn't mean you don't have a story worth telling. Again, let's stay on universal principles, Virid. Nobody thinks their story has any value. Nobody. And that's why you will see them pile up the credentials. I got this degree, I got that degree. I'm going to put, it's that extra set of letters I'm going to put on my LinkedIn profile. And that will put me over the top. Where the truth is, the real magic is within. There's always a story you can find. Now, I do this in my work. All right. So if you want would a quick example help?
Yes, go for it. Thank you.
Okay. So here's, if you'll permit me, that's the concept. No one thinks their story has any value, right? And so because, as you mentioned off the get-go, I am a recovering broadcast journalist, which means I still think like a reporter. I'm looking for the story that no one's paying any attention to. And because this is universal in its scope, so it doesn't matter whether it's a company, okay, it doesn't matter whether it's a B2B organization, a nonprofit. How about a municipality? Okay, let's do this on a municipality. Is that fair?
Love it.
Why would, so start from the beginning. Why would a municipality want to rebrand itself? Why would any municipality want to create an irresistible brand? You have to start there. Why?
Maybe to attract economic growth.
You're right. Like, there's only two reasons: economic growth, tourism. And they go hand in glove, but you know what I mean? Bring in more companies to create more jobs, bring in more tourists, and a byproduct will be more civic pride, so people stay there, live there longer, pay their municipal taxes, et cetera, et cetera. Like, those are the only high level reasons. All right. So years ago, we got an invitation from a small municipality in Western Canada. And I know you are Canadian, so you're going to love this. And this small municipality, 33,000, has no marketing budget to speak of. It's only a 33, the town's only 33,000, right? So when we got the invitation to help them out with this, and I don't want to get into the details of it, but we do these executive boot camps where with companies, and that's most of our work with organizations, bring leadership teams together and really drill down to figure what's the story here that can be the foundation for everything. Okay. Municipality, you'll appreciate a little bit different because you've got more stakeholders, more moving parts, as it were, right? You got the Chamber of Commerce and the business leadership. You got the fire department, the police department. You got all these different constituencies. So I remember we had about 25 people in the room for that boot camp that day. Here's the town. You ready for it, Baird? Mm-hmm. Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. What do you know? Top of mind, because remember, we did not rehearse this. What do you know?
Nothing.
Nothing. And you're from Canada.
Well, because I'm from the eastern side of Canada, but I've heard the name. I have heard the name.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair. And what can you attach? Anything? Can you attach anything at all to the name of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan?
There is an image of a logo in my mind, and I'm not sure if it's the correct one, but yes, that there is an image that's in my mind.
Okay. So here's where it goes. The mayor of Moose Jaw invites me in to help work with the city to figure this out. Called Once and For All. And the real issue is identity. So if people are really watching and listening, here's how it works. You got to know your identity beyond products and services, with an identity that is highly distinctive and instantly recognizable. You've got to nail that down. Highly distinctive, instantly recognizable. If I say, what's the identity of an athletic shoe company in 3 words? Do you know what's that?
Just do it.
We call that the Mona Lisa effect. It's so fast, it's so top of mind, and it translates into billions of dollars in profit and market share. The same is true for a municipality. Now, how do municipalities all market themselves? Whether they're in Arizona or any part of Canada, any part of America, if you study the economic development literature or the tourism literature or anything, what are you going to see, Vered? You're going to see every town is friendly. Every town is a great place to live, work, and play. Every town speaks marketing language that is pure vanilla. Doesn't offend anyone, doesn't inspire anyone. It doesn't offend, it doesn't intrigue. It's safe. And there's no safe play out there in terms of creating the legend. You can't create the legend playing it safe. You've got to do something no one else would ever do. And so, where you can take security and comfort and confidence from is knowing if you know your own story and can really speak your own truth, there's really nothing risky about that, is there? Not really, but you got to find the gold. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to use Moose Jaw as our universal example. The principles apply across the board. So I get into town. The boot camp, and we have a number of sessions we're going to do, like we have a number of extraction exercises to figure this all out that's been developed over a long period of time. But the day before, the mayor's kind of showing me around the town. And that's the other thing, is I'm looking at this through fresh eyes, right? Because here's another universal truth. You can't read the label when you're inside the bottle. Most company presidents, CEOs, leadership teams are so inside the bottle, they can't see, it's the forest for the trees or whatever, right? And so I see this cab company in Moose Jaw, and I go, that's interesting. And then I see the same name from the cab company on this dumpy hotel. And then I see this big mural on a wall downtown. And I'm going, this is interesting to me. And I'll tell you what it is. It's Al Capone. Capone's taxi, Capone's hideaway, big mural of Al Capone. Why is Al Capone the top of mind awareness king of gangsters all over Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan? Okay, why? That's what I wanted to know. Here's what happened. In the 1920s, during the height of Prohibition and when gangland violence was rampant in Chicago, Moose Jaw is where Al Capone and other members of the criminal underworld would go to hide, because it was the last stop on the train. They would drive west on the train, cross the Canadian border. Moose Jaw is the last stop. At the train station, there was a network of underground tunnels. And those underground tunnels went through the downtown. So if you needed to hide during Prohibition, Moose Jaw was one of the best places, right? If you were a nefarious gangster doing all kinds of criminal activity, let's say, you had bootleg whiskey or immigrants, you needed to hide, you would hide them in Moose Jaw. No one would ever know. Okay? Here's what I found fascinating. For decades afterwards, the citizens of Moose Jaw tried to deny that the tunnels even existed. Think about that. And then there was like a water main break in the early 90s. It caved in. There's evidence of the tunnels. Okay? And so one of the things we discovered through the course of our extraction exercises was they had this very sketchy kind of past, right? Well, instead of running away from it, Farid, what if we embraced it? What if we did that? I'll never forget to this day the chief of police jumping up in our session that day and saying, guys, I'm listening to all this. He says, do you know in 1927, the day shift busted the night shift for corruption? So the most popular watering hole in Moose Jaw to this day is named after the town's most famous prostitute. It's Rosie's on River Street. Like, you see what I mean, Vera? There's all kinds of anecdotal and very physical evidence. Are you ready for the punchline?
Yes.
Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, Canada's most notorious city.
I love it. Yeah, brilliant.
Every other town is friendly and nice. No. We're the notorious city. Right? So far, so good?
Yeah.
So that's an identity that was created simply by doing what we've already talked about. You got to dig and find the story. Go back to the Mona Lisa effect. The story either happens to you or leadership will have to create the story. Since that time, it was January of 2019 on YouTube when the mayor of Moose Jaw issued a declaration of war against Norway. Because those nasty Norwegians had the audacity to build a moose statue 30 centimeters higher than Mac the Moose. It was an insult, okay, to not only all Moose Javians, but as you can appreciate, all Canadians, because in Canada, we hold our national treasures in high esteem, like ice hockey, like maple syrup, and Mac the Moose. That's what we do in Canada, right? As you know, right? And so was the mayor of Moose Jaw going to take this one sitting down? Was he going to turn the other cheek? Barrett, how can you turn the other cheek if you're claiming to be the most notorious city?
Wow.
Wow. It was social media and mainstream media warfare as they went toe to toe. He went toe to toe with this mayor from Norway. Millions and millions and millions of dollars of free publicity. For about a 3-week period, he did 15 to 20 media interviews a day. CNN, the BBC World News with 90 million viewers, 4 minutes on the Colbert Report. You know, when you got the South China Morning News calling you up, or the Los Angeles Times, and what do they do? Asking you about your thoughts on this, you know, Cold War II between Canada and Norway, two otherwise peaceful, loving nations. You see where this goes?
Hilarious. Yeah.
Okay. It's great fun, but it's pure storytelling.
That's right.
Remember, you can't create the legend without the story. And so much of the story will hinge on, well, what's the identity we're going to create in the first place, right? Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
And the happily, because we like stories with, you know, endings that are what? Well, how do we like our stories? Happily ever after. The mayor from Norway actually came to Canada. There was an international moose summit. They signed a moose truce with a mooserandum of understanding reported in full by the Washington Post. Okay. But the best of all, not only did tourism spike 30+% in year one, and tourism has continued to grow, and because you can already picture what's happening, right, Virid? What are more and more tourists doing when they come down that Trans-Canada Highway and they see the exit for Moose Jaw? Hey, let's go. Let's get a picture of the famous Mac the Moose, and let's stay for, you know, grab a bite to eat, shopping, all that stuff. Now, in January of this year, and I reported this on I do a monthly blog post. It's called Leaders and Legends. I got the phone call from the city manager in late January of this year. I nearly fell off my chair. City of Moose Jaw just did an economic development impact study. Long story short is this. Since they became Canada's most notorious city 4 years ago, just in new investment, new economic development, $1.25 billion.
Wow.
It represents nearly 1,000 new jobs. Now, so many of those workers and those employees will never know deep, deep down what your viewers now know, your listeners now know, on how much, and let's face it, the story of Mac the Moose and that whole thing with Norway is but one of a dozen or more different stories that have been told and are now still being told to keep elevating the level of notoriety, if you will, in this town. The other towns in Western Canada who are also competing for tourism dollars, economic development dollars, have no idea how Moose Jaw took a chapter out of Big Little Legends and through leadership created all that.
Wow. That is incredible. And really congratulations to you and your team. And of course, the team in that municipality for being, open and curious and willing to courageously, boldly, right, put a stake down as to an identity and to defend that identity. And I think that some of the listeners that are hearing you today are probably beginning to have some of those wheels turn in their own mind. Well, what is my story, or what can myself and my leadership team create as a story? So what can you share for us around some maybe questions to ask ourselves or steps to go through? Let's start with the first, which is to access our own story. And then maybe we'll shift to
Yeah, that's a great question. We'll definitely get there. Let me back up first, though. The first thing you want to do, give me an example. We said we did not rehearse or strategize. Give me a business category. So let's say the person watching or listening is from what category, Virid?
Consulting.
Consulting. What type of consulting?
Business consulting.
Business consulting. Great. So you're a business consultant, and you obviously want to become more attractive in the marketplace, generate more attention, command higher fees. Is that basically it?
Sure.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. What makes you different from all the other business consultants relative to the realm you're in? Okay. So management consulting, business consulting, what's going to separate you from all the others? The first thing you got to do is study what we call category language, and it's real easy to do. So when I do my live workshops, as a preliminary exercise, one of the things I get people to do is study 2 websites. Pick your top 2 competitors, call them A and B, go to their websites. This is A/B testing for real. Just go to your top 2 competitors, study their websites, and there's 3 things you want to pay attention to: words, visuals, and strategy. And then figure out, but just between A and B, what are the commonalities? What are the common words? If I look at website A and then I go to website B, I see, oh my goodness, the language in some cases, it's almost cut and paste. If I go to the visuals, what are the commonalities with the visuals? If I try and look at, well, what's the strategy or the positioning or the themes being explored here? Okay. I'll give you a simple theme. It's right out of the movie Elf with Will Ferrell. Remember, he comes down from the North Pole, goes to New York, and he sees the sign, "World's Best Cup of Coffee." And he goes in, "You did it, guys." You will see this in different categories, Virid. We're the best. We're the world's finest. Unfortunately, your strategy is one filled with unsubstantiated claims. That's not solid. It's not built on a mountain of truth. The example we just shared with Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, was that built on a mountain of truth? And did they have the moral authority to call themselves the notorious city?
Yes.
Part of their DNA, right? But to get there, they had to study. I remember we must have studied in that workshop about, let's say, 24 different websites from different municipalities of similar sizes in Western Canada and different parts of Canada. And then we just did the chart. What's all the common language? That's the first thing you got to do. Identify what is the category language. What do you think the next step is? If everybody zigs, you zag.
Yes.
Right? But you can't really get emotionally uncomfortable. That's the thing. People have to get very disturbed and emotionally uncomfortable. I could spill all kinds of solutions today, and we'll get there, but it's really gotta bother you immensely before you're actually going to do anything.
Mm.
Otherwise, you're going to stay in the category language world where it's basically cold vanilla porridge, just like everybody else, because everybody else is looking for win-win solutions. And as a results-oriented leader, I aspire to the highest level of integrity for all of our stakeholders. You see what I mean, Vera? That's like real humans don't speak like that. So you cannot create the legend or the irresistible brand by speaking the language of your category. It can't be done. So once you cross that bridge, what was the next question? How do you start to drill in and find it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What you do is you recognize there's always, so whether it's a person or whether it's a company, let's just look at a person and a company are both organisms in their own way. What we've discovered is every single one of them, person or company, has 4 core stories. There's 4 core stories. Okay. Number 1, the origin story, which is like Genesis right out of the Bible. In the beginning, right? So role play it with me. What's Verid's origin story?
Good question. So I would say in the beginning, she was an engineer that was unfulfilled in her job.
Okay, we'll riff this out on origin, knowing there's 3 others. Is that okay?
Love it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Let's do this. And again, anyone can do R&D, which as an engineer, you know, what is R&D? What is it?
Development.
It's rob and duplicate. Okay. And so let's go back to the origin story. And I deliberately didn't give you specific instructions. I want the real story, not the headline. I want the day you realize she was sick of being in the engineering field. I want the day, I want the location. Were there other characters involved? Did this happen at a coffee shop or a pizza place? You see, and this is universal, okay? No one thinks they have a story. Yes, they do. But bring us back to the day of why you went on a different route.
I would say that the light bulb moment came when I was at the company was Pratt & Whitney Canada, and I was working as a structural engineer. And one of the fellow engineers who was, just about 30 years old, he was a young person, but in my eyes seemed, older. He was talking about how every day he does exactly the same thing. He goes in and he, and I remember thinking, wow, like every day you go in and you do exactly the same thing. And I said, I am not going to do that.
How old were you at the time?
I must have been about 21.
21. Now, here's the rule of thumb for all storytelling. Let's just do very quickly how this works. Is that okay? Specifics are more believable than generalities. Specifics. You're 21 years old. Where was this in Toronto? Where was it?
Toronto, in the Mississauga office of Pratt & Whitney Canada.
We're in the GTA. We're in Mississauga. You're an aerospace engineer, aren't you?
I'm working in aerospace. I'm a structural engineer. I'm working.
Whatever, but you see, aerospace is a specific that was left out when you had the chance to tell it. You're always in aerospace. You're a 21-year-old structural engineer in the aerospace industry. I have these did you have lofty goals and ambitions when you got into this?
I did, yeah.
What were they?
At the time, it was to be CEO of the company. I didn't even know more than that. I just wanted to lead the company. There was a female leader at the time, and I said I could do that.
Great. Could you work this into your origin story? See, when I asked you, what is your origin story? You only gave me a tiny sliver. I ask you a second time, and you've expanded it to the guy who said I do the same thing every day. Now I really want you to tell it in about 2 minutes about the kid who grew up dreaming about being a CEO. Like I want to know why you grew up dreaming to be a CEO right away. That's interesting.
I knew that I was meant to do something bigger.
Why?
I think I just had it. I believed in myself. Truthfully, I don't know it. So if
Please
I go back
watch where I'm, go back.
If I go back, all right. So when I was in university at the University of Toronto, I remember that I was, helping out. I was volunteering for an organization. It was an association called Air and Waste Management, and I was helping them to, do this big conference. And I was the only student out of, hundreds of adults that were doing this. And, that was kind of leading this aspect of it. And I remember that one of the female leaders who was CEO of a large organization said to me, you're a doer. You're not just a talker, you're a doer. And I remember that was like, wow, ding, right? I can do this.
Hold that thought. Write this down. What was her name? Just first name only.
Jane.
Jane. How old were you?
Oh, I must have been 19, maybe 2019, probably.
Yeah. You're 19 years old, and she's a CEO of what kind of company?
It was in the Air and Waste Management. I don't know, some environmental company. I can't remember the name.
Was it $100 million company, a $500 million company, $1 billion company?
I don't know, but it was a big company in those days.
You could find out, couldn't you? You could add rich detail. And that's the point of the exercise. That's the point of it. One day, someone saw something in you. Jane saw something in you, and she lit the light bulb. You went to aerospace and structural engineering, and then another thing happened. And then you said, no, not for me. No matter how much I want to be a CEO someday, I can't do what that guy's doing. What's his first name?
Howie.
Howard. I can't do what Howie's doing. As soon as you add names, dates, specifics, that makes your story believable. And this is what most business folks miss out on, is the chance to go deep into their own personal history to find their story. People relate to these stories. They really, really do. They don't relate to a LinkedIn profile. Because what are all the LinkedIn profiles? Sanitized, homogenized, full of business speak. It's the world of copy and paste. And even if you get Chat GPT to do it, it's still the world of that, which is regurgitated, recycled. You see where this goes? There's rich emotional truth inside our own stories. It's up to us to dig it out.
Yeah, thank you. That was super cool and super helpful. I appreciate it.
Oh, and you'll appreciate too, like, this is, I've been doing this for quite a long time, and I just see the patterns of how business people in particular think, in terms of not fully grasping the depth and the nuances of how powerful stories can be told simply through their own experiences. Like, suddenly I picture Howie in a hangar or on an assembly line, right? But we could add to that, couldn't we?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's just one example of the origin story. Everyone's got an adversity story, some story where they went to hell and back. So origin, adversity, achievement. Okay. The Everest. What's your personal version of your Mount Everest? Right? It's the day when, like, there was a day you won somewhere in your business career. 365 days of your business, at least once, in a 10-year period, you must have won something. You must have succeeded somewhere. There must have been a triumph. And then the other story, so that's 3, right? It's origin, it's adversity, it's achievement, and then it's Batman, which is your why, your greater purpose. Why does Batman fight crime? Why? 7-year-old Bruce Wayne sees his parents gunned down in the streets of Gotham. And from that day forward, the character is created. Now, even though that's fiction, the universal truth still holds, right? And so now, is any of this easy? Is any of this paint by numbers or cookie cutter, Vered? What do you think?
No.
No, which means nobody's going to do it. Only the rare few will dig in and start to figure this out. That's why you mentioned you've mentioned 2 words, courageous and curious. It's crucial to understanding this. In a world that wants the answers faster, I'll just put in the chat GPT and that'll tell me the answer. This is not that.
Thank you. And of course, I imagine our listeners have already, again, so many ideas about perhaps their origin story, maybe adversities that they've experienced,
right?
Achievements or triumphs, or that, impetus for movement, for change, for that bigger purpose. And can it be combined? I mean, silly question, but can you have a little bit of origin, but also then that led to some adversity and
well,
so on?
Here's the thing. It's not a linear process. In other words, that's a great question. It's not about one story per se, although there will be a signature coming out of it later. But here's what you do. When you're doing the heavy lifting and figuring this stuff out, you take the origin story, you take adversity, you take achievement, and then you take Batman, and it's one big bowl now of alphabet soup, right? And we do this in our consulting and coaching work all the time. What are the common threads that run through each story? This is all about process. And are there common threads that run through each story? Those common threads are called values. Your stories illustrate your values. You can't just, it's not like going to the supermarket or the grocery store and, oh yeah, I'm at the value super center here. I like integrity. Yeah, I like that. I like passion. I'll put that in the shopping cart. This is what everyone does, right? No, but you're laughing, but isn't that what they do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, let me go to produce and get a little bit of, teamwork and innovation. Yeah, that's us too. And it's one big shopping cart of values. And we say, no, absolutely not. Your own stories will reflect the values that are there. Make sense?
It does even more than make sense. It makes heart. I mean, it's not just here, it's here. And I think that's the distinction.
Right. It's got to come from here, and even, dare I say, at a soul level. So I'm can I share my own example just so people can see, like, I've done this, right?
Yeah. Curious to hear more about your story and
okay, so, if it helps to illustrate the principles, then it'll be helpful, right? Because I never want to be that self-serving guy, and I'm not interested in 1 million followers, and I'm not playing that same game that everyone else plays in this space. But I am convinced that when you know your own story, all kinds of doors can open up, all right? But here's the kid as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old who is utterly fascinated by reading. He's a bookworm. He can't read enough books about sports history. Do you want to go into the history of the Green Bay Packers and how he collected every hockey card known to man? Yeah, and he knows all the stats because he's a junkie for history. Watch the progression. sports history, then it's military history. Wow. What are all the names of the generals for the Overlord campaign, the generals, admirals in the Pacific, and all the different theaters of operation? Ate that up. And then, of course, after that, we got to add WW1, the Great War, and then over time, the Civil War in Vietnam, right? You see where this goes. Then it's music history. How many different versions of Deep Purple went to market? Right? There was the classic Mark II version, right? With Blackmore, Gillan, Glover, Lord, and Pace. And then Blackmore and Glover left. And then, Coverdale and Hughes come in. Like, who else would know this? But you've got to be a deep history nerd to really. Ken Burns is the god I worship. I'm joking, of course, but you see where I'm going, right? Documentaries, and then what do I get into? Reporting, journalism, newscaster, then a sportscaster, which is really history in a hurry. Do you see how this big little legends? The amateur historian is doing the study of legends, decoding their enduring appeal. Wow. Does that help how it all comes?
It does. And I imagine it helps our listeners as well to begin to connect. Yeah. So what is the origin? If we were to go back, what did I love doing? What did I naturally have an affinity toward? What would I even want to do now if, there were no limitations? What's fun and exciting? And so that brings me kind of to, before we go to kind of the leadership creating the story, I want to have one more question about this, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Which is, what is the bigger intention here or objective of the organization or the individual have in play? Because, it's almost like, do we start from the stories, or do we first clarify what is our intention for the business, for ourselves? Like, what is the mission? And then, do the story exercise?
Right. Here's that fabulous question. Here, because I always like starting with clarity first, right? And by default, big little legends, how everyday leaders build irresistible brands, gets lumped into the marketing category by default, when really it's a leadership program wearing marketing clothes. Because only leaders build great brands, not marketing consultants or advertising agencies. It's never been done. Who built Apple into the brand they are? Steve Jobs. Done. Like, that's the way it works. You can trace this through history and see it's the same thing. Ultimately, the mayor of Moose Jaw, the one we talked through, who actually got it across the finish line, he did with the help of a core team. Okay. So in terms of, I think the question you're asking is about from a clarity point of view, because I'm talking to someone later today from Pennsylvania, and it's going to be the same conversation. What is the objective? And in my view, the objective is to be the undisputed, undeniable category of one. That's what you want to do. You want to be in every, so whether it's you're a legal firm, or you're, like I said, a municipality, or you're in transportation. This particular organization later today is in the tire business. Okay. The category is irrelevant, isn't it? Doesn't matter whether you're a car dealership, you're doing insurance, you're an architect. What do you ultimately want to be? Category of one. You're the only one in the category. There's only one of you. Now, how are we going to show that to the world? But that's the objective. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. And I appreciate that, because I think that really for somebody to do this process and truly stick to the process, and of course to not defending, but really continuously aligning with the identity on an ongoing basis, it requires a bigger vision. Yes, I really do believe that. And it does require I believe that kind of concept of category of one, not so much from a sense of, competing against others, but more of fulfilling our highest and best potential. Yes, right. Our business's highest potential, the greatest good that we can do in the world. And so thank you for that. Now, if we were do we have a few more minutes? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Thank you. So if we were to shift for a moment to the second type of story, which is the leadership creating the story, tell us a little about that.
Well, there's 4 types of stories, right? Like I said, specifically, everyone can go back with what they know now, if they've been listening all the way through, and write an origin story. What will be curious is how many of your viewers and listeners would take the time, because I've done this. Who's going to take the time to write a 500 to 1,000-word essay on my origin story, my adversity story, my achievement story, or my Batman story? Who's going to do that? We already know the numbers are so small, but that's why it's called Big Little Legends. It's not Big Little Average. Mm-hmm. It's not, right? If you want to create the legend, and I think this is what you're asking, Vera, it is what we've identified through research. This isn't theory or speculation. We've interviewed well over 1,500 people. We've got this all documented, categorized, okay? So humans ascribe 4 qualities to that which is legendary. The word legend is very interesting in the human vocabulary. And you're going to love the tie-in and the connection of this, okay? Because it goes right to the title of your podcast. So just picture in any room, let's say 30, 40 people. I used to do this on flip charts all the time, right? And what are the human qualities and characteristics of legends? Well, we've collected well over like 400 different qualities, okay? Broadly speaking, they can be categorized into 4 sections. That's all we got to know. They fall within the scope of when you section them off, right? For number 1, and there's no order, but just so you know, number 1, mindset. Is it growth mindset or a fixed mindset? Will you start with a beginner's mindset and be very curious and very open? I believe you've already indicated that, right? A growth mindset, and you're probably very familiar with the work of Carol Dweck and her book, Mindset, and I'm guessing you've probably read that back to front and front to back 6 times over. Is that fair? Right, but Carol's also got a pretty incredible body of research on the study of mindset. That being said, a growth mindset cannot exist alongside skepticism, cynicism, and being jaded. Not going to happen, is it? And you already know this, and your viewers and listeners know this. So there's mindset. Number 2, aspiring ideas. What's the aspirational idea? Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, I could go on and on in the business, through business history. Mother Teresa, there's always an aspirational idea, okay? Deep down, what am I trying to do here with Big Little Legends? Help people step into their own truth so they don't wear somebody else's. Number 3, change. Are you willing? Do you have the ability, capacity, and willingness to either embrace change or drive change? You're either going to initiate or embrace it. This is a great time. Watch what's happening right now every day and how people are reacting to artificial intelligence. Some are trying to shut it down as though it's not going to go away, right? Or some are getting very open to the idea of embracing this change that is going to rock the world 1,000,000 times over more than it already has. So we just went through mindset, aspiring ideas, change, and number 4, no surprise, Legends do hard things. Legends, by definition, since the beginning of do hard things. So whenever I hear something is hard, I go, that's great. Why? Humans want the easy way out. Great. That means none of my competitors are going to go in and do the hard stuff. No one else is going to write over 1,000 blogs or shoot a bunch of videos, put them up on YouTube. I mean, the one thing we did speak of before we jumped on, I think it was were you referring to that 5-minute movie trailer that kind of captures what Big Little Legends is about?
YouTube, it was fantastic.
That's the one, right? And I'm just saying that's process, but that was 8-9 months of writing and multiple shooting dates. And then all the editing that went into that. Why? Because we knew that's got to live for a long time. That's not just like a weekly blog, right? And I look at it now and I'm still proud of it, but I know that's it. Legends do hard things. Terry Fox. How hard was what Terry Fox did? That name is not known throughout America, is it, Vered? Guy ran 143 consecutive days on one leg and ran into, immortality through his marathon of hope. I'm proud to say that as a Canadian, and you're a fellow Canadian, one guy running halfway across the country before ultimately he couldn't run anymore has now raised over $1 billion for cancer research. To me, Terry Fox is the classic Big Little Legend, right?
Absolutely.
Right. But we can find there's Big Little Legends everywhere around us, but more importantly, they're also buried within us.
Wow. I think that that last piece, around us and buried within us, because whatever we perceive around us, that means it's already in us. Otherwise, we could not perceive it, which means, I think for everybody listening, if they're conscious of any legend, if you will, in the world, in their life, that means that that legend is inside of them. And it might just be ready to be seen and to be acknowledged, and for us to take action and use that and help others in doing so. So, Gair, I'm just so deeply grateful to you today. Everything that you've shared and the wonderful stories that you use to illustrate what you teach and how you help people has just been absolutely practical and meaningful, and I believe transformational for those that choose to do it. And so how can people learn more about how to work with you, how to access the incredible programs and resources that you offer? Of course, you also speak. How can they do that?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. You asked so many good questions. I love how you're drilling into a more expanded mindset and playing a bigger game. And I'm the easiest guy to find online, biglittlelegends.com. Gair Maxwell, Gair. There's only one of me out there, and I thank my mother, God rest her soul, for the name that I hated as a kid. But around the time of my mid-40s, I realized, wait a second, this is not a bad asset to have, right? Yeah, and we also have a rich archive. So if you go to the website, you'll see we have a series called Leaders and Legends. So we don't swamp anyone's inbox. We only post once a month, but we want stories that are all connected to the kind of topics that leaders and legends would be interested in to further their own journey. And well over 90% of our stuff is on video. We believe video is a big game changer. And it's going to get more and more prevalent, not less. And so, yeah, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn and Facebook and now on your podcast.
Right. That's right. Well, thank you, Gair. I think for me personally, this was very meaningful and very impactful. And it reminded me personally, and I sense that for many of our listeners, is that, we are already legends. The legend is already there. We don't need to find it, so to speak. We just need to surface it
That's
and
it.
some effort. But when we do, everything changes.
Everything. If you'd have told me that one day they'd invite me all the way to Taiwan to go speak to a business audience, do you think I would have believed you? Not a chance, right? Or, you know, travel the way I get to travel and speak in different parts of the world, and not a chance, Farid. And so, but that because who was I? I was just a reporter in a small mid-market town in Eastern Canada at one time, right? Who would care what I thought about? But I think everyone's got that within them. I really believe that, and I've had the good fortune of helping companies, organizations, individuals actually tap into that.
That's right. And all the stories that you've shared, of course, your own story just demonstrates even more. It means that everything is possible for those listening to us today.
Absolutely.
Just got to take that next step, which you've helped us with. So, once again, really so much gratitude and love. And I wish you continued success and joy and fulfillment in your own story.
Right back at you, and hope to see you in Arizona someday.
Would love that. Thank you.